Hi, and welcome back to 16-Minute Church. My name is Michael Venema. Thanks so much for joining in. A few lines from one of the poems in the Bible. I will give you thanks, God, with all my heart. I will sing your praises before the heavenly beings. I will bow down toward your holy temple and give thanks to your name for your constant love and faithfulness.
I see the King of Glory coming on the clouds with fire. The whole earth shakes, the whole earth shakes.
Let's keep moving through Mark's account of the life and work of Jesus. Last week we got as far as chapter 3, verse 12, and even just this short way into Mark, Jesus has done a lot of things. He's confronted and overcome Satan. He has confronted and sent packing evil spirits, and repeatedly Jesus commands those spirits to shut up. They shout that Jesus is the Son of God, and about this they are correct, but it is not yet time for Jesus' identity as God's Son to be publicly broadcast. That time will come later when many people will already be wondering just exactly who this Jesus is. Also, at this point in Mark, many people have been healed. Jesus teaches with extreme competence, impressing a growing number of followers. But the traditional teachers of the laws of the Jewish faith grow to resent Jesus. He offends their interpretations. This is a very serious development that places Jesus in danger of his life. Let's continue on then, starting with verse 13. Again, I'll use the format I've been using, reading the passage and then making some comments about it that I hope will be a real help to you. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those whom he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. So here are a few comments about these lines. Going up onto a mountain, that's an interesting detail to notice. This would have reminded the Jewish people paying attention to Jesus. It would have reminded them of Moses. In the Old Testament, in Exodus 19 and Exodus 22, Moses, the leader of the Israelites or the Jewish people, goes up to a mountain and there he receives instructions from God. Other people do not come with Moses until they get special instructions to come up. They saw God. So when Jesus climbs a mountain and called the ones who he chose to come up with him, they likely felt that they were reliving a powerful moment in the history of the Jewish nation. And I think they were, in a sense, reliving that moment. Now, Jesus settles on 12 of those who went up on the mountain with him. He settles on 12 to become his apostles. The word apostle is a Greek word, and it means someone who is sent out. In other words, those 12 can expect Jesus to send them out when the time is right. And Mark tells us that that exactly is the plan. There are no women among the 12. It turns out that in the Old Testament, women do figure into the stories in the Old Testament in important ways. They do not often lead, but some do. Miriam, Deborah, Esther, and from outside of Israel, the Queen of Sheba. Wisdom in the Old Testament book of Proverbs is Lady Wisdom. So the makeup of the 12 apostles or 12 disciples reflect the assumption that dangerous leadership roles belong generally to men. But both before and after Jesus in the Bible, women do lead. And many Bible readers notice that the number of women in leadership appears to increase after the accounts of Jesus. So that's something to keep in mind. Different churches have different takes on this issue, but I think that what I've just said is not far from what most churches would teach, and which quite a number probably would teach in exactly that same way. But I hope it helps you. But of course, feel free to leave a comment. So at this point, a question. Why 12? Why does Jesus appoint 12 to be his disciples and not 11, not 13, not 19, not 24? Is there something special about the number 12? Well, indeed there is. The people of the nation of Israel traced their history back to Abram and his wife Sarah. Abram had a son Isaac. Isaac had a son Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons. And those 12 sons became the fathers of the 12 tribes, or the 12 family clans, we might say, that made up the nation. The 12 are at the beginning. When Jesus chooses 12 men to be his disciples, he's saying, I'm making a new beginning for the nation of Israel. And here again, we see another possible reason for Jesus not choosing any women. The 12 sons of Jacob are all, of course, sons and not daughters. And Jesus, I think, wants to be very clear in his use of this powerful symbol of 12. The renewal of his people goes back to the earliest days of the Jewish nation, and that renewal is for all the 12 tribes of Israel, for the whole nation. I often like to imagine what it was like for Jesus to roll into town. People would know he was coming. Word would have gone out ahead. Jesus' reputation as a controversial and extremely skilled teacher, his reputation as a healer, his reputation as a fearsome opponent of demons, that reputation was growing by the month. And here he comes, over the horizon, maybe down a dusty road, and with him 12 others. Now, there were no videos in those days for people to see what Jesus looked like, that they could watch in advance of Jesus coming. No magazines to show people what it would be like when he arrived. But here he is coming, a powerful healer, a teacher, a prophet of God, and with him, the 12. A rebirth for the 12 tribes for the nation of Israel. It must have been quite a sight, a bold, living image that Jesus constructed. And it likely sent shivers down the spines of those observers who were longing for God to show his presence again among the people and to give them a fresh start. Well, there's one or two other things I'd like to say about the 12, but that will have to wait until next week.
I see his love and mercy washing over all our sin. The people sing, the people sing. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest.
Let's dive back into the Sermon on the Mount. We've been following that along for the last several videos, and the Sermon on the Mount is found in Matthew's account of the life and work of Jesus, chapters 5, 6, and 7. And it's called the Sermon on the Mount because Jesus places himself on a mountain, and while there, he teaches his disciples God's instructions for life as followers of Jesus. In a recent video, I think it might have been last week's, I talk about the importance of this location, the mountain, and you might like to check that out. I think it's kind of interesting. Well, today we're looking at what Jesus says about making strong promises and swearing to keep them. And as usual, again, I'll read the passage and then I'll say a few words about it. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything else comes from the evil one." Now, Jesus here follows a pattern that'll be familiar to you if you've been following my videos. He states the law from the Old Testament, the Jewish scriptures, and then comments on it. Now, the words, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made," are based on an Old Testament passage, Numbers, the book of Numbers, chapter 30, verse 2, and several other similar passages. And if we go online or read some printed commentaries on this part of the Sermon on the Mount, this is what we discover. The Jewish teachers of Jesus' time apparently overthought this law. Some of them were of the opinion that you had to pay special attention only to some of the promises that you made. And that was promises that you made in the name of God, in the name of the Lord. It would be very serious to break a vow that you had made if you invoked God's name in making it. Other promises, however, were supposedly easier to break according to some of the teachings going on at the time. You could break them if you needed to. You could make such promises maybe casually and not take your promises very seriously. This is one thing that Jesus wants to address. It's not right, and he wants to address it. The second thing he wants to address was that people were inclined to elaborate their promises with oaths like, by heaven or by the earth or by Jerusalem. So they would tend to stay away from actually invoking the real name of God, but they would use words that were kind of close, heaven, earth, Jerusalem. And Jesus says, look, such words are close enough to invoking the name of God himself, so that if you're not going to invoke the name of God, you better not invoke those things either. You're still in very serious territory, even if you don't use the actual name, but only something close to God. So don't bother with that. And incidentally, Jesus says, what's the use of swearing on your own head, on your life? You don't have any control over your head, and your life is no sure thing, so just forget it. In fact, Jesus teaches, forget all that nitpicking about which promises to keep and what kind of oaths to make. In the end, God requires you to live without the hypocrisy of such hair-splitting arguments and rationalizations. Just be a truthful and trustworthy person all the time. Period. End of discussion. If you say yes, mean it. And if you say no, mean that too. Dressing up your statements and assurances with all kinds of, by God this and by heaven that, it's nonsense. Keep your language plain and simple. Keep your promises plain and to the point. Anything else is just an attempt to impress and manipulate people and make yourself look like a big person. That kind of thing comes from Satan, the evil one. He is the master and the source of trickery and deceit. He is the master of verbal smoke and mirrors. You, however, Jesus says to his listeners, have a different path to follow. You have a different guide. You have God to show you how to live. Let your words and your life be simply trustworthy. That is how to fulfill the Old Testament Jewish teaching about making oaths and promises. Let your life, let all of your words be simply trustworthy. Well, not a bad teaching, eh? Challenging. Impossible to keep perfectly, of course, but absolutely what we should aim for.